actress, whatever.
Say
trainer, and organizer.
Trainer and organizer. Okay.
And then you can be like, I wanted to call you an activist, but you said to call me an organizer.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that on the interview. Don't worry, it's a relaxed, it's a conversation, so you can correct me anytime you want. And you can womansplain the thing. Mm-hmm. What's it called? Mansplaining, and it's the contrary. What would be womansplaining the thing?
It doesn't really work.
Female-splain.
It doesn't really work that way, but it would be.
It
would be womansplain because we don't have the structure to call it a womansplaining. Because if women were structurally advantaged in a way that made women explaining things a thing, then we would call it womansplaining. But unfortunately, in our society, with patriarchy.
Well, I grew up with I grew up womansplained all the time. Like my mom, all my aunts, and most of my teachers were women.
Yeah, and that's fine.
So they were all. That's like I was.
But the concept.
I was always led and had these examples of women, explaining things to me.
Yeah, which is great, but the concept of mansplaining is connected to the position that men have in society. So in your specific experience, you may have women who explain things to you, but the phenomenon of women explaining things is not a dominant phenomenon. Like women talking, sure, right? And you have that in different contexts. But like, for example, have you heard of manspreading?
Manspreading, that's when they open their legs like that?
Yeah. Like manspreading. Like so like I often sit like this, or I take a lot of space when I sit, but that's just me. I just happen to sit.
Perfectly normal with me. I don't know what the problem is.
What's the problem? There's no problem, but there's a structural condition that makes it so that when you look at the subway in New York, there's all of these men who sit like this. And that is a social phenomenon. It's not just the fact that men.
But it's a biological phenomenon because you got the balls like right there. You're like this. It's uncomfortable with your balls.
I don't have balls, but I am constantly sitting like this.
I know.
So that's not.
But I think it's comfortable too.
No.
It's comfortable for both.
It's an ease
for both genitalia.
It's an ease with which men take up space.
Yeah.
And there is a lack of ease. That does not mean that women do not ever take up space, but there's a lack of ease of women taking up spape. And
I've tried going like this, and you crunch your balls right there.
No, but if you were sitting next to me, and you
I'll go like this.
Exactly. And that's not manspreading. That's not manspreading because you would so that's the thing. So
you're respectful of other people's space.
Exactly. But that means that you are.
It's kind of uncomfortable here. not the conversation. This part.
Now you're gonna be thinking about how spread your legs are.
Yeah.
The conversation.
Not. This is all you're recording, right? We can put this in the interview somewhere, or we can just start the interview. Hey everybody from Nerdopolitan, we started having fun. We're talking about mansplaining, but the conversation today with Quyen Ngo. Welcome back to Nerdopolitan.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great. It's her second time here. She's an actor and a trainer and an organizer. We were explaining the difference between organizing and activist, and maybe we could start with that.
Okay.
All right.
The term organizing or an organizer just implies that that person is working on something day to day, and they work at literally like what it says, organizing. Because at the end of the day, the term activism is a very broad umbrella, and it can encapsulate many, many different actions, right? And people have different opinions on it. But for example, if you
some people can think that activists are violent or something, or protesting all the time.
Sure. People can think that, but also, are you an activist if you choose to is it an act of activism to boycott Amazon, for example? What like plenty of people will say that
Boycotts can be a form
Yes.
of organizing, or
no. So that's the thing. If you're organizing, then you might organize a boycott.
All right.
But and so when we talk about organizing, we mean putting in the work to organize that thing. And then activism is encompasses that, right? So if a single person participates in a boycott of Amazon, then that is it falls under the umbrella of activism. Is boycotting one time or even twice in a month or twice in a year, is that organizing? That's not organizing. That's activism. And so I think just when I say organizing or organizer, it's just getting a little bit more specific on something that I am trying to do or dedicating my time to doing on a more consistent basis. So it's not just like an act; it's like a thing that I'm doing over time. So that's a distinction.
So, for example, following the example of the boycott, when you organize a boycott, how do you go about organizing a boycott? Do you like get your social circle together and okay, we're gonna spread this. Don't buy these products until they give in to these demands, or what are you looking for when you organize a boycott?
Exactly. So when I was making the distinction between activism and organizing, what you're talking about is coming up with tactics, and the tactics that you choose and the outcomes that you're aiming for is dependent on the way that you're organizing, right? So if somebody is working with a group of people, they would then identify what they consider their objective for a specific action. And so if that action is a limited thing, like it is very important for us to boycott this, let's say an event, a conference that's happening in the city, then you, along with people, set those parameters and those tactics and those the approach to doing it, and then you go and you execute it. But the work of organizing is like, at the end of the day, like so much of it is extremely logistical. It's extremely boring, you know? Spreadsheets, emails, text messages.
Spreadsheets are always boring.
Yeah. But that's how actions are born. And so how you do that, that's dependent on the person, right? Like, and so
what do you put on these spreadsheets? Like, okay, this person, what do you put, like their occupation, age, telephone?
Well, we're getting into like the territory of like data collection, which is a little bit trickier, and especially when it comes to organizing, especially if you're organizing in territory that's a little sensitive, you don't necessarily want to put down people's personal information.
Yeah, because then the deep state like get control of that and put everybody in jail.
Yeah, and so if you're gonna do spreadsheets, it would be more for like which cross streets you're going to be going to, or what time of the day you're going to have certain demonstrations. So like that's like what I mean. Like it's scheduling. Like it's like if you're gonna do any of this stuff, like it requires it requires a lot of organizing to do anything. Like to resist consistently or even inconsistently requires work and
Lots
time and energy. Yeah.
Imagine that. Just for this podcast, it was hard to organize. Just for this interview, because you're a busy lady. You're always, you're training, you're teaching, you're acting.
Yeah.
How do you balance all these between teaching, acting, and training and organizing?
Yeah.
You always find the time. You're always
always
on the move.
But I always find the time to do what though?
That's the question. Like, what do you prioritize?
Yeah.
Your acting, your training.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm in Los Angeles. That in and of itself, like where I am geographically, is a testament to my prioritization of that part of my life, that
Right.
career,
Right.
which is acting.
Acting. And she's a great actress, by the way. Please look at the audiobook. I forgot the Mountains Sing.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about that last podcast. If you haven't seen that podcast, and if you hadn't heard the audiobook, heads up, it's gonna make you cry. So don't listen to it in traffic.
Or listen to it in traffic.
Listen to it, but not while you're driving.
What's the problem with crying in traffic?
Well, if you're going, if you're speeding, you won't see the lanes.
Yeah. and then
So I was driving. I was like, oh fuck, I can't see the lanes. It's a sad story, but it was really well interpreted by you, and the writing was great. It was a really sad story. It was a fiction, but it was based on real events. So that's just so people can check back and see our other interview. But let's keep talking about what we're talking right now.
Yeah. And then the book that came after The Mountain Sing was called
You also you already do the audiobook for that?
Yeah,
really?
yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna cry some more then, I guess.
Yeah.
I haven't listened to that one yet.
Yeah. And during that narration, I think I had already started thinking this when I did the first audiobook, but then when I did the second one, at one point I left the.
What's the title of the book?
It's called Dust Child.
Dust Child. Okay.
Mm-hmm. In Vietnamese, there's a term bụi đời and bụi, which is dust. Đời is life, so it's the dust of life, and so Dust Child is it speaks to this term. Bụi đời, and it's about Amerasians. So the children who were born of U.S. soldiers during the Vietnam War, and so she builds the story surrounding this character who is a black Vietnamese child who was the child who. Is the child
of an African American soldier with a Vietnamese woman.
The Vietnamese woman. And so the book starts off with his story, but it weaves the stories of multiple people who are linked to Amerasians. Amerasians being the term that is
American Asian.
Yeah, but it's unique to that time. And so when I was narrating that book, at one point I left the studio and I walked into the bathroom and I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, holy shit, like I really, really feel like
the characters?
No, I really feel like I have dead people speaking through me. Like I feel like
you got to that level of connection with the text that you felt like they were channeling to you.
I feel like I feel a little bit like a medium when I.
This got scary all of a sudden.
Yeah, I really. It feels. Anyway, it feels a lot like that. And it's so wild because I hadn't thought about it when I had that moment with myself, and then I remembered that during the first book. The author, she told me when she finished listening for the first time, she said to me that it was the first time, that she felt like she heard her grandma's voice.
Really?
And she didn't grow up with her grandma. Her grandma had died before she was born. And so she wrote that book to imagine how she would talk relationship, to her. Yeah, a relationship with a grandma. Then when she listened to it, she said that she felt like she heard her grandma's voice.
Through your voice.
Through my voice.
Wow.
And I didn't,
That's powerful.
I didn't think about it. And then when I was narrating the second book, I felt like it's like indescribable, but I felt like it's like an exhaustion, but it's not an exhaustion that's like, oh man, my voice is tired. It's like an emotional exhaustion that feels like what happens when something just like moved through you.
It was like an exorcism. The exhaustion after the exorcism, you were possessed
exactly.
by the spirits of the past.
Like holy water in the studio. Yeah. So anyway.
The spirit of Christ compels you.
Yeah. I don't know how we got here, but yeah.
Get out of this Quyen's body. How do you expel the voices, the spirits that were in you? How'd you manage? In the mirror?
yeah, no. I just I did it, and then I was like, oh shit, wow, like it feels, it's like kind of like what you said. It feels a little spooky.
But it must feel powerful too, though. Like I think that experience must have felt great too, though.
Yeah. I mean, honestly,
I mean, you felt tired, exhausted, but also like you did something cool.
yeah. And so, when you asked me to come back to talk,
Yeah, we were going to talk about politics, but I didn't know this part with the book.
But I mean, it's completely
cool. Yeah.
the reason why I bring that up is because I narrate books about war.
Yeah.
I narrate books about war specifically because I'm Vietnamese. I narrate books about the Vietnam War.
Right.
And I came to be intimate with the ravages of war in a way that I never thought would happen. Like if you met me when I was a teenager, like I was thinking about war already, because when you're the child of refugees, like if you are lucky enough to have parents who are not so traumatized that they refuse to talk, which is something that's super common in Vietnamese households, where parents cannot talk about their experience, cannot talk about their journey. Like my entire family, like my aunts, uncles, mom, and dad are all boat people. They all, even the ones who ended up staying in Vietnam, most of them attempted to leave the country by boat. My mom and dad got here by being a part of that exodus in 1979.
Across the Pacific?
No, so they go and so there's different routes through to Thailand, to the Philippines, and then from there there's a process of going to different places. So some people ended up in Europe, and then many people ended up in America. So they stay in refugee camps in these countries, Thailand, the Philippines. There's basically different journeys that are impacted by different, I don't even know the word to call it, like that are impacted by different struggles and challenges. And even using the word struggle and challenge feels like such a diminishing of what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like if you go on a route that has no pirates, then the challenge is death, right? Starvation, dehydration, and death. And then if you go on a route where there are pirates, then your challenge is also death, but death by murder, rape, pillaging, and like this is all a part of those struggles, right? And these are struggles that are essentially extremely universal when it comes to the war-torn communities. And so I learned about these things when I was young. So my family members talked about getting caught midway during their journey, and then having to go back and being in jail for a little bit, trying to barter to get food while they're in jail. So I heard all those stories growing up, right? But it wasn't until I started narrating these stories that I committed to being against war in a way that I never, ever, like, even when you're a part of a war-torn community or a war-torn family or whatever, like the victims of a war-torn country, you don't necessarily commit to being against war, right? But narrating, like when you sit inside of the brain and the soul of somebody who has experienced the ravages of war, like I don't know how it is for other people, but for me, I learned to stand like in all of my body, like stand against war in my adulthood, basically. And it was through these texts
and through your stories from your family too.
Yeah, but not. I think like emotional experience
Yeah.
of basically like metabolizing war trauma and trying to like spit it out and bring it out in these texts. It's like you, at least for me, I came to think and feel the horror of war in a way that I couldn't think of it when I was younger. Like if my mom says like, oh, yeah, it's wild, but like, and it, you know, thank God, like it's amazing that my mom and aunt and dad and you know, aunts and uncles have been willing to like talk about these things. But my mom basically over the course of my life, she slowly slipped information out about her journey after the war.
So you were saying that they kept it quiet, they kept it in
no, they didn't keep it in, but they told me like at 5 years old, I'm not ready to hear about rats biting people at their side. I'm not ready to hear about rape.
Yeah, they didn't want to give you nightmares.
Yes, and so then they say we escaped by boat and it was treacherous or it was difficult. There were, you know, maybe they didn't mention pirates yet.
They left out very important, like little details that were big.
Yeah, exactly. And then over time, then then my mom, you know, as I got older, would slip in details here and there. But what I'm saying is, even hearing these type of details, it doesn't push me to the place of understanding why war is unacceptable. It's just like that happened and it is horrible, right? But I'm saying that narrating books about war has made me feel such a profound commitment to being against war that I like feel it in like every inch of my body. And it comes from like I think it's like 2 books ago that I did. It's a piece of fiction called My Father, the Panda Killer. It's a great book. You should read it.
My Father, the Panda Killer.
Yeah.
What's up with the pandas? Why are they killing pandas?
You'll find out when you read it. But it's a book.
It doesn't have like a Kung Fu Panda twist to it?
No. Like I said,
more like a tragic.
You'll see when you read it.
Okay.
Or listen to it. But that book is about a young girl who is raised by a single father and a Vietnamese girl, Vietnamese father, and he is physically abusive. And so when I narrated this, I narrated both the child that was being beaten and her perspective, and then I also narrated the journey of the father who ends up being somebody who beats their child. And even as I'm talking to you, I can feel myself like want to use the word abuse in a way that is I'm trying to like add nuance to this term abuse, because in the Vietnamese community, everybody beats their children, right?
Still?
So like
with a belt?
People that
or harder than that?
There's different tools, which actually in the book she goes into these details. But like if you talk to people my age, I would say something like shout out to all the Vietnamese people. If y'all listen, correct me on this data point. But like 80%. This is again just like me
got whipped at
me
some
guessing,
point.
but like 80% of the Vietnamese community, like people my age, were beaten by their parents.
Yeah.
And so getting beaten.
Yeah, my
like,
age also, like my generation also at one point got spanked or whipped or some punishment, some physical punishment.
Exactly.
And it was normal.
Exactly. And so this type of physical punishment is extremely common in the Vietnamese community. But what's wild is like, again, growing up, you know that lots of people are getting beaten, but narrating the experience of a child, a defenseless child, being beaten by her father mercilessly every day, it does something, at least for me, it does something to your brain and your soul. And it hurts so, like, and when I do it, I'm like living inside of the person, and it is, and then you can feel how the war trauma has contributed to these cycles of violence, right?
It's a cycle of violence, like the abuse, some form of repression and oppression.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, like the bully was bullied.
Yes. Yeah.
And it just,
Exactly.
like somebody taking it out on someone else. Like the parents must have been whipped by somebody else.
Yeah.
Or by like the state or by life.
Exactly. Or by
the
life,
police.
Exactly.
So you have to get on the kids.
And the thing is, and I was just mentioning to you how my mom told me about her journey, like escaping Vietnam. And she talked about pirates, right?
Yeah.
But when I narrated this book, I learned about pirates in a way that I would have never been able to think about it. Like, it's so, because it's a book, it's so vivid and it's so alive and it's so horrific. Like, and it makes me, when I'm inside of the audio booth, I feel almost mad that there's no way for me to channel what I feel when I'm inside the character outside. Like, there's no way, there's no experience that's quite like that. But that's why I say, after narrating all of these books about either the war itself, the victims of war during the war, or years and decades after the war, and how fucked up we all are because of war, like, my commitment to being against war is more intense than it has ever been in my life. And it's the result of living inside of all of these people who are the victims of war. And innocent people and civilians are always the victims.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so if we're talking about what is currently happening in the world, that is the foundation, and that is what informs my stances and my perspectives when it comes to standing against, standing against
murders and
slaughter,
and can we say genocide and stuff like that?
Yeah, and the can we say genocide and stuff like that?
Can we say it?
Yeah.
All right. So, for example, before we get into the other subject, just to recap, the moment you were or became like interested in activism was through acting and reading. That's when you decided you wanted to be like a trainer.
No. I started acting at the same time that I started training in middle school.
Yeah.
And those things kind of they went
hand in hand.
Yeah, hand in hand.
But you became truly committed to anti-war when you started reading these books, narrating.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
So now back to the interview. So the reason we brought Quyen is because I feel like the world is, it's just like going into a hopeless endless cycle of constant war, and Quyen is a trainer, and I feel like she has more optimism. Like, look at all the way she laughs all the time. She's always happy. I laugh all the time too. I can't complain. But I see like with hopelessness, like like the structures, like the powers, they're corrupted, and I think that's why there's constant wars. Mm-hmm. There's not like a real democracy, at least in the United States and in most countries. There's like not a real democracy, and most politicians are corrupt, and whoever buys them are who keep the constant wars going on. Mm-hmm. If we could get like big money, the weapons manufacturers, big pharma, if we could get all these powers, like like the Wall Street, if we could get all these powers out of politics, where they represent more the people and not the money. Mm-hmm. That's my opinion, but I think it's impossible now. With Mitch McConnell retired, but he kind of helped enable all this big investment in politicians' campaigns with the super PACs and all that. using the false claim that it was freedom of speech, that people were exercising freedom of speech to finance politicians, and that's when like one of the moments where the politicians stopped hearing like the average Joe and more like, like the big Rockefellers to get their money, and they will always represent them, whoever pays them, whoever buys them.
Yeah.
So I don't know what activism and training can do against that. I'm open to suggestions.
So as you were listing out this laundry list of corruption, you said multiple times like the word power, money,
Yeah.
right? And I think that people tend to make these statements like, "Oh, well, all politicians are corrupt," or
Right.
like we're all fucked because politicians are so fucked.
If they're not all corrupt, they will be corrupt at one point. That's my point of view.
And so,
And I could be wrong, but I don't know.
my point of view is that power, and the condensing and consolidation of power is the issue, right? And I think that power, when we allow structures, whether it's like social structures, even family structures, when we allow an uneven distribution of power, then that's where we start to see everything fall out of equilibrium, and then injustices take place. And so if you name any scenario in which you see something really, really messed up happening, I mean, most of the time you can dissect it and see how the power dynamic in that situation has caused the issue. So in all, like, let's say, for example, for you were talking about activism and organizing. In movement building strategy, so much of it is about slowly chipping away at power. Like, how do you pull power away from the structures that are causing the repression and the oppression? And same thing goes with personal and intimate relationships, right? When you see abuse happening, if you see it in your personal family relationships, if you see it in intimate relationships, how do you take away power in those circumstances? That becomes the strategy for replacing what equilibrium is not currently there and is causing abuse and pain and harm, right? And so I feel like that is the root of all of the issues in the world. And if you look at his struggles, and historically it is about the consolidation of power that leads to corruption. So it's not that only really messed up evil people become politicians. I'm sure if you think about people that you've admired throughout your life who end up going into politics, and somehow you can start to see them lose what looks like their soul, right? But it's also a testament to the way that power, corrupts, the way that
it's built.
Yeah, the way that it's built. And so the way to, again, work towards a society where we harm less is to remove power and distribute power, and work towards a world where we all share our power, because all of us are we all have our own values and our skills, the things that make us beautiful, and that's all of our powers. But we live in a world where we've allowed certain ideas to consolidate power. And so
Right.
that's, to me, I feel like that is the heart of it. And to speak to what you were talking about, the sense of hopelessness, like, we're existing anyway. Like, this is my approach. Like, we're existing anyway.
Yeah.
And
whether you like it or not.
whether you like it or not, you could kill yourself. But if you're not, then you're living here, And if you are committed to a world where power is distributed and even, so that people can feel like they can self-determine, that they can live the life that they want to live, what does it take what can we do on a day-to-day basis to start to move toward that? And that's going to look a little bit different for each of us. But I think that it's extremely worthwhile for all of us to ask ourselves that question: how can I do that? In what ways can I contribute to the healing of the world? And also concurrently, in what ways can I resist the systems and the structures that are allowing the consolidation of power? And that's to me, it's not like, that doesn't restore hope. Like, that's not what me, like, I laugh, and I don't laugh because I'm like, oh my God, we're going to fix the issues. We're going to be able to,
What is it,
like,
a sarcastic laugh? When you
no,
laugh, what is your
I
laugh about?
because there's joy in my body.
You have joy.
I have joy, and
you live in joy.
I live in joy. Yeah. I live in joy, and it doesn't really say that much about how much I think things are going to change rapidly in the next year of my life or the next 10 years of my life. And I'm just more so like doing what I feel is necessary in order to be existing. And if we are willing to challenge and disrupt the structures that are kind of percolating around us all the time, then I think that we can get closer and closer to the place of, at the end of the day, what I'm saying is a place where everybody has as much power as the next person. And
Right.
that's going to take all of us, and it's going to take an obscene amount of time, but it's worth it, right? It's
Right.
worth it because you're living anyway. Like,
Right.
So make a choice. Like, do you want to contribute to that world, or do you want to succumb to the comfort that plagues our lives?
Do you want to play along with the status quo and just, keep your head down, enjoy your money, and I don't know, be by the poolside, and because that's what happens. We were talking before we started recording about like the emotions and dealing with different types of personalities, right? Mm-hmm. So, for example, how do you deal with that as a trainer, as an activist? Mm-hmm. Like they say, we were mentioning that there's like people that's very passionate, that like they get full of hate, but there's also people that don't give a shit, and there's people that they're just confused, or they're on opposite sides of the issues, like the polar opposites. So or how many have you identified the many types of people? How do you deal with these people? Like everybody. How do you deal with everybody? You have the people that are passionate, the people that don't give a shit, the people that don't know about the issues. How do you organize, and how do you deal with these personalities?
So specifically in the training work that I've done, we for like one of the core pieces of the curriculum that I have trained with over the past like 2 decades is just basic conflict resolution curriculum, and that deals with the idea that conflict is inevitable, and that there are ways for us to establish empathy when conflict occurs, and that method is the way that we can start to internalize that conflict is not necessarily a bad thing, and that given that conflict is inevitable, how can we do it in a way that makes us feel good, right? And going back to what you're saying, like to be in a place where you can feel joy because you recognize that life comes with these challenges, and then you have an ability to establish empathy and build trust and build understanding and things like that. And it's hard. So that's like the basic curriculum which basically helps us think about conflict as something that is going to exist and going to happen. And are we willing to do the work of, and so this goes back to the idea of working, right? Like, are we willing to do the work that makes it so that our relationship to conflict is a healthier one? That's one piece. And the other piece of it is something that I started working with more recently. And it is about it's called courageous conversations. There's a few different kind of versions of it that exist out there. And this toolkit for having courageous conversations, which are basically difficult conversations, it breaks down what's happening inside a person when they are triggered. And like, for example, if I say like trigger, like is that something that you can kind of conceptualize and explain, for example, like emotional triggers. It's something that is like, we kind of know it, right? But we don't necessarily know how to explain it. Or many of us don't know how to explain. I know for myself, I didn't know how to explain what an emotional trigger was.
What are your emotional triggers, for example?
So, for example, like one of my triggers is like tied to feeling unwanted. And so for example, like years ago, I noticed that when somebody says something to me, like, so a loved one says like, you can come if you want. Like, I got irrationally upset.
Yeah.
Right.
A loved person from your family. Oh yeah, you can come if you want.
Yeah, you can come if you want.
If you don't want to, you don't have to come.
I actually said to my best friend just like a few months ago.
Like, uninterested.
She texted me and she said, and we're best friends, and so we've talked about our triggers for many years. This is like friends of like 20.
So you constantly talk about your triggers with your best friends.
I already talked about it, and she still does it, right? And so she texted me and she said, this is happening on
so she
Friday
never learns.
night.
Shout out to your best friend.
Yeah, shout out.
She hasn't learned your triggers yet? Come on.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the thing. Like, when I say that conflict is inevitable, right? Like it's always just going to happen, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And so she had texted me, this is happening, come if you want. And I said, like, bro, you know that is one of my, I don't know if I use the word triggers, but I said, that's one
by the way, we have a streaming tomorrow. Come if you want.
Exactly. You gave me an actual invitation earlier. No. And so so that's an example of one of my emotional triggers. I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask you about your emotional triggers, although you're welcome to share them.
You can ask me. I mean, what are my emotional triggers?
What's an emotional trigger?
For me, like, really, it gets me like really upset, like lies in general. I hate lies.
Yeah. Okay.
I hate lies, like whether they're like little lies that maybe a family member says, or like lies in just like in the world, like by politicians. I hate lies. Because they lead to bigger evils. Lies are like little evils that lead to bigger things. So I really hate lies. When I catch a lie, I'm really good at telling when somebody's lying. I think that makes me good for like filmmaking. Like I can tell like when an actor sells the thing really good, I can tell like, oh, he's acting really good because I kind of into it. I believe it. Yeah. Yeah. So
that's one of your
lies really piss me off.
Yeah. So like I was saying, I wasn't able to explain what a trigger was, until I started really.
But our triggers are only negative, or they can be like positive.
So they
reactions?
can just be. So triggers are anything that causes an intense reaction within us. But the most important, one of the key things about triggers is that they are. So if I just sit here with you and say like, I hate it when people say, "Come if you want," right? But it's not like that's not. That's not what a trigger is, or that's not what a trigger is defined by. A trigger is defined by each of us have a history. We have our memories, we have our history, our personal histories. What our personal histories are, what took place in our personal histories are what create and define our triggers. So you're sitting here and telling me that you are triggered by lies.
Yeah.
What I
in a
can't
negative
tell,
way.
yes, in a negative, but there has to be something that took place in your life at some point. It can be very early on in your life, or it can be a little bit later on in your life. These can all contribute to our triggers, right?
Right.
That something happened in our life that has made a specific thing trigger us. And so that is a function of the brain. And so when we're talking about conflict, polarization, difficult conversations,
Right.
something that I feel like we don't generally talk about is understanding these things, understanding the brain, understanding triggers, understanding emotions, understanding why
the feelings and
is
emotions.
exactly, why is my body reacting this way? Like this person just said, if you want, and my heart rate is going up, right?
Right.
Or you perceive somebody as lying, and somebody else might not consider it lying, but you see it and you consider it lying, and you get very, very, very pissed off, right?
Right.
So in one of the trainings that I do, I talk about the brain and the limbic system of the brain, which is the center part of the brain, and it contains.
That's where the amygdala is.
Yes, that's where the amygdala is. So for some reason, when we're talking about political debates, when we're talking about social media debates, we don't talk about the amygdala, right? We don't talk about the prefrontal cortex.
Right.
But that is controlling everything. And like the way that we interact, right?
Right.
So if I get into a conversation with you right now and I trigger you, what if then like you're getting heated and I say, well, and Antonio, come on, think about it logically. The thing is, once you're triggered, it's happening in the limbic system, in the center of the brain. And so me saying, you're not talking sense right now, it doesn't, that's trying to speak to your prefrontal cortex.
Right.
Right? That's where logic and rationality, that's that center, that's the part of the brain that deals with rationality and logic. So, but if you're triggered, then the amygdala, everything is happening there. And so I can't get into your brain or your soul or your heart or whatever.
Yeah, you put like a shield, like a block.
Yes, you're putting a shield and get like everything that's happening. Like when you said the passionate person, the what did you say? The passionate guy.
The guy that doesn't give a shit.
That doesn't give a shit.
The people that are uninformed, I guess.
Yeah.
Or or they were maybe programmed, because we were talking about that earlier. Like people that are been programmed by a different program. They have a different program in their head.
Yeah. And so, but then all of us, irrespective of the narrative that we have grown up with or recently attained, have these functions of the brain, right? And what I feel is like, especially in the last 6 years, over the last decade particularly, everybody keeps on talking about media literacy. Right? The issue with our world is media literacy, is misinformation, is disinformation. And I feel like a huge piece of the puzzle that's missing is emotional literacy. Right. Nobody's talking about, like, when was the last time you were having a fight with, a communist homie and y'all were like, whoa, let's talk about what's happening with our brains right now.
No, usually
like we just go deeper and deeper and deeper, right?
Usually when I'm in a discussion or a debate, you get into a loop of the facts of like, but remember this fact, yes, and this fact, and this fact.
Yes, the facts. I hate the facts.
The facts of life.
The facts. Yeah. Very recently.
You hate the facts, but that's how you tell you if somebody's lying or not.
But that's the thing. If you're having a conversation with somebody who operates on an alternative narrative, does it like what are you? So again, talking about the.
So we're talking about alternate facts, like the lady that she was like the spokesperson for Trump. Those are alternate facts.
Yeah, exactly. But then none of us were like in general, we're not talking about the way that our brains are connected to our emotions and how that affects our ability to see each other, to hear each other, to work together and figure out how do we fix this, how do we stop this, how do we like, so we're not doing that, right? In general, I think it's a huge piece of the puzzle that is missing. And
Right.
so sorry.
So we need
Earlier,
like a meditation.
huh?
Do we need like a meditation before we like try to do some activism? So we could get all in the like
No, it's not about doing
harmony?
it before. It's about it's incorporating
the
yeah,
head
yeah.
or the brain function in a conversation.
in a conversation. It's understanding the way that our bodies operate and incorporating it into the way that we move, the way that we act. And actually, it's interesting that you bring it up in the context of like organizing, because so much of the organizing world is run on a need or a desperation or something like that. But then that's how people end up burnt out and traumatized and unable to function. So we fry our nervous systems, right? And many of us who don't organize are also frying our nervous systems. And so when I say something like I hate facts. It's not that did I say that? I said I hate facts. No,
We caught it on camera. She hates facts.
I lament that there is such a fixation on information
Yeah.
and knowledge, and especially in the current context when we're dealing with, people and narratives that come from two completely divorced concepts of history and the world. Like, you cannot rely on facts. You are not going to do not try to beat somebody in a fact fight. Because even if you think you have
Because facts change all the time. Science is evolving,
Yes.
and they're proven theories that are disproven later.
Yeah.
Just by facts.
Or
so
if it's
whatever you're defending, to death.
Yep.
Right. This moment, those facts could change if it's a science-based thing, or if new evidence, like an archaeological evidence, proves something else different.
Yeah.
Like, for example, there was like a big thing with Russia. Putin, that he undisclosed a bunch of paintings of Jesus that he was black, like paintings from like early Middle Ages. He was represented as a black man or dark skinned man. So, and some universities in England too. They said like, no, this like Jesus would look like this Palestinian man, right?
Yeah.
So
and so this is like going back, like it's just,
and it makes sense.
Yeah, it's history, knowledge, all of these things. Like we all have access to information, and depending on your context, you have access to a certain type of information. The reason I say that I hate facts. I'm just saying that we live in a society that is fixated on like getting it right.
I'm being right.
And being right.
Everybody
and
wants to be right.
Everybody wants to be right. And that's also bullshit. And it like, and by the way, so you mentioned earlier, I started teaching, I started substitute teaching. And when I'm in schools, I notice that we are, and so this programming happens very early, right? Whether it's in the school or in our households, where it's like, don't be a bad kid, be a good kid, do the right thing, don't do, and these concepts of right and wrong, good and bad, black and white, is a part, I believe it's a huge part of our inability to understand and accept that we live in a world where different people have different ideas, and we're going to need to figure this out together. And so it's really, I mean, it's extremely fascinating and a little and depressing when I'm in a school and like, let's say I haven't done it in the past like 2-3 months. About 3-4 months ago, I was in an elementary school. And in the elementary school, I don't really remember these techniques when I was in kindergarten and first grade, but everything is like, you did the right thing, so you will be rewarded.
You get a gold star.
You get a gold star. And then you start to create a system of
a reward system.
A reward system. And so then we are, as children, become addicted to the validation and the affirmation that you are right. And so why do you think that we are like this now, right? When we're in an intellectual or a political debate, and it's like, well, the most important thing to me today is that I am right and you are wrong, you know? And that's not really...
Well, how can you change that in the school system? Is there a device to massage the kid's amygdala if he gets it right? Like, oh, good job.
No, no. That's what the star system does. Like, it's the most basic system, and that's what you're doing. You're rewarding people based on good behavior, right? And then
you got the facts. You got the facts right too.
And
so here's your gold star. You got the math right.
Yeah, exactly. And so then we grow up and then we are on social media and it's like, it has to be this way. There's only one way to think of this. And then also people then get extremely defensive when they feel like they are being told that they are wrong.
Right.
And then it also causes a situation where it
escalates.
Yeah. One of a casting director that I'm friends with, he on social media, almost every day he posts, get curious. Like he writes, this is unbearable, get curious. It's okay. It's okay that if you change your stances. He always says this, and I always think to myself, oh, like I really appreciate this framing. And the reason why I think of him or remember it is because nobody else in my social media posts every day and says like, at the end of the day, get curious. It's okay to change your stances. It's okay to be, it's okay if something that you thought yesterday turns out to not be true.
Right.
Get curious, you know?
That makes sense.
Yeah. And so,
it's like the saying is there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Yes.
And then you say, why would I skin a cat?
But yes, so when it comes to like the school system, I mean, certainly that's I'm sure there are many, many different ways. And I'm sure like a lot of Montessori schools and like all of these types of schools are starting to breed nuance, right? Curiosity and the space to make mistakes and then figure out like what works for you and what works for your brain and the way that you operate. So I think that that's a good place to start. And I also think that we can be doing a lot of that as well, like in our, daily lives.
Right. So let's put this to work in a hypothetical situation. Let's say President Quyen Ngo of the United States.
Okay.
How would you solve the genocide in Gaza? How would you talk to Netanyahu?
Oh my God. It's funny because I had another friend on social media who posted an AI generated image of
Netanyahu?
Of Netanyahu, or no, it wasn't just Netanyahu. It was I think the prompt was something like Israeli government and Hamas leaders participate in facilitated roundtable discussion in order to peacefully work out
their emotions.
Their emotions, but also their issues, right?
Their issues, right.
And I wouldn't personally do what he did, like prompt the AI to generate that image, but I do appreciate that concept, right? And that a little bit of disruption to our everyday witnessing of these horrific atrocities, to just like look like, oh, what would it look like if you had a bunch of these guys just sit down in a room like this one and talk,
right?
Like do what I was just talking about,
right?
Have a courageous conversation, think about their brain, de-escalate, and figure out.
I think they would literally go,
yeah,
blow.
So I'm not going to fully indulge you in this magic wand type of question.
It's a hypothetical situation.
Yeah, I'm not going to fully.
It's a hypothetical, and it's up to your imagination. How would you solve the conflict?
No, because I don't believe that any conflict anywhere, including our intimate conflicts and our everyday conflicts, are resolved by a single thing, right? And so, but I certainly would start with doing the thing that is going to stop the loss of life now, right?
Right. How would you stop that?
Yeah.
How would you stop that?
So
if you were president of the United States, how would you stop that?
I mean, I would, first of all, the president of the United States can't, like, that's not how the world works anywhere, right? Like, it's not like the president of any single.
But they really depend on the U.S. dollars. So.
Yes, of course. So yeah, I mean, that's why I'm saying I'm not going to indulge you in the question of like, what would I do? Like, halt the funding and stop the weapons industry. That, like, we can go into all of that, and I think it's not like breaking down again. It goes back to like facts and knowledge, right? Like breaking down all of the components that are going to be the right thing to do is still getting to that place of like, what is the right thing to do? But certainly, if I am taking what I shared with you is an anti-war stance, then I am going to take the actions that is going to cease the killing, right?
Right.
Stop the killing. And so then there's always going to be somebody on the other side who says like, but then you enable the group of people.
You enable the other group.
All of this stuff. But it's like, we're witnessing the everyday
but you can't have
slaughter.
Yeah, you can't have conversations if you're killing people.
Yes, so exactly, you can't have conversations if you're killing people. So that is going to be my answer 100% of the time. Like, stop killing people. And so, of course, if you're in the position of a U.S. politician or the president of the United States, and that looks like stop funding stop funding
the war, the genocide.
Stop funding it. Stop supplying the weapons, like all of those things, right? Again, I don't want to get into the breakdown of like all of
details.
all of these components, because there are many components.
There are many components, yeah.
But the money, which is the power, that funds the military operations,
the war machine.
Yeah, the war machine. I would stop that. But again, you could have answered that question for me, because I already told you that I'm against wars. So if I were the president of the United States, then I would do the thing that stops that fueling that.
And you would do that with all conflicts worldwide, like stop funding war.
Yeah. And people would be like, it's not that simple. It's like, obviously, it's not that simple. And trust me, slaughtering more people is not the
That's
solution.
not simple either, yeah.
It's not simple either. I mean, again, like, it's actually extremely connected to all forms of like punitive systems that we have built in the world. It's like you can use the same logic that fuels war is the same logic that fuels incarceration,
right?
The prison system, and then the thing that maintains it is profit, and all of these things, right? And it's not like my general stance is, if you do the thing that literally kills people, or figuratively kills people, kills the mind, the body, the soul, right?
Yeah.
Which is prison system. then this is not it. There's no way. That cannot be the way. And there is another way. And we have to work together and learn how to talk to each other in order to figure that out. And so, yeah.
Okay, so we learned about the emotional, like talking about the emotions of, people that you organize. How do you train them to talk with people that have opposing views? Or what do you suggest to your students or the people that you work with? Okay, how do I get on the level with this person and try to talk things out with a person that has totally opposing views? How would you suggest that they do it?
Yeah. I think the first part is to figure out how to understand the things that we were talking about, understand how to manage your own triggers, which is necessary for all contexts when you're going to have a difficult conversation, right? And especially if you know that you're going to have opposing viewpoints or challenging viewpoints,
right,
then you have to start with that place. And
right,
you have to, both parties have to be in a position to manage themselves. And if they're not, then what can you do as one party to ensure that you're not worsening that scenario,
right,
worsening that situation? So if I was working with somebody, and I mentioned to you, I do the piece about conflict resolution, I do the piece about courageous conversations. So if I'm working with somebody, that's where I go first. I start by talking through how the way that our brains work and how do we notice these things in our bodies as they happen, and then go from that place. Another piece that's not in either of the pieces of curriculum that I'm talking about is something that I read in a book called High Conflict. And she talks about, but interestingly, we're talking about all these different scenarios. In the book, she calls on these different scenarios throughout time and in different places around the world that have led to high conflict. And one of the things that she names is the point of no return is humiliation. So one of the things that I would share with somebody, if they're interested in having a very difficult conversation or a political debate with somebody, is that if you get into the territory of humiliation, so you say something to the person that attacks their core, right?
You mean name calling like Trump does? He goes into name calling like Sleepy Joe and all these, he goes into that name calling or what level of humiliation? Because he does it because it's funny and he gets adepts with his comedy.
Yeah, but in those situations, it's somebody talking about somebody to an audience. But I'm talking about one-on-one, or even if you're at a dinner and you were talking to somebody and you're debating with somebody, and then those people are you have people around you who are watching your conversation, and then you attack that person, the person that you're debating with, you attack their integrity.
Not their argument, but their integrity.
Exactly. Their
you
integrity.
Call them, oh, you're insane or something like that.
Or something dirtier or worse, right? Yeah. Something that really actually hurts them or humiliates them.
Right.
You don't want, basically you don't want to get there, because once you get there, there's the people will dig into their position, and basically you're not getting anywhere. So that is the first thing. And so one of the things that happens all the time with the internet is that
name calling.
We constantly humiliate each other. Yeah. We degrade each other. We call people all kinds of crazy shit online.
And then people get likes. Haha, that was funny.
Yeah, exactly. But it does nothing for us for
the argument.
Or in terms of seeing each other and getting closer.
Well, I feel like somebody that's good at debating calls it out right away. Like, oh, you're attacking me. You're not attacking my arguments. Mm-hmm. So let's stick to the issues. That could be, a good comeback from, a type of an effort to humiliate someone.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so if you have those mechanisms, then that's awesome, right? But again, so often we're not fully in control of what's happening to us emotionally in these scenarios, and it's like you can get to that place. And honestly, I'm sitting here with you talking all this shit about the brain and stuff. Every single time I train about this stuff, within 2 days, like if I'm formally running a training, within 2 days, I get into a situation where I get triggered, and then I see it happening, and then I know that if I'm triggered or they're triggered, that trying to talk logic doesn't work, and yet I keep trying to do it anyway. And so, like, and that's the thing, like, we are all human, we are all doing this all the time, and the best thing that we can do is to work at it and commit to hearing each other and seeing each other and doing that, day to day, so that we can hopefully get to a place where we slowly dismantle all of the power and evenly distribute it, and so we can live harmoniously.
Well,
that's my Bible.
Is that your closing statement, or do you want to finish? Or do you want to finish with something? Or I mean, that's a nice closing statement, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think I didn't, like.
I don't want to finish yet because this conversation is awesome. I love talking with you. But
yeah, but I mean, I think like if I didn't, it through all of the things that we're talking about, that is definitely, like, if I were to boil it all down, like that's really, that's where I stand. That's where I stand. I stand on that. Like, I think it's really important to.
What are the little other side tips, like little details that we could use for training, debating, and trying to, let's say somebody, we have a listener or someone that wants to, be more active politically or in their community.
Yeah. Well, I mean, tips in relation to what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
I would first start with saying that we were just talking about being in conversation and getting to a place of humiliation or degradation.
Yeah, avoiding that.
And I think, like, avoiding that is one thing, but like committing to not doing that, like committing to a life where that's not, again, like, and that's the thing, like when people are obsessed with knowledge and facts, like I know things and you don't know things, and let me tell you about all the things that you know, like when people.
Well, you're on the wrong show, because this is Nordopolitan. We love facts.
Yeah, I'm trying to shift that paradigm. But the fixation on that and having to get things right, I think is, that's personally for me a good place to start, because you're not helping, like I really think that people need to be seen and to be like not feel like their worth is based on the information that they hold, right? And when we get into these heated debates, like that's basically what's happening. Like, and then by the way, like one part of the curriculum that I work with talks about the elevator of a trigger. And like when you're triggered, like there are many floors that you drop to, but the core wound of a trigger is the feeling that you are not loved. And I know, like let's say, like if we're talking in a very like a masculine way, and sometimes I train people who are super masculine and they're like, oh my God, this is so serious. Like I get triggered and I'm not loved, but it's like, actually, yeah, that's what's happening when somebody is triggered. It goes to that place, it goes deep to that place. And no person, no man or no woman is immune to that feeling that they do not have worth, right? And so that's definitely one of my tips. And completely unrelated, no, not completely unrelated, but a little less related to like the brain and triggers and stuff like that, right, is more so about the current landscape. I don't actually have a tip. It's more just like a musing. So, we started this conversation talking about books, narrating books about the Vietnam War.
Your work.
Yeah.
Your work
Yeah.
as a voice actor.
Yeah. And that's about war. And a few years ago, I think it was 2017, I interviewed the photographer of the Napalm Girl photo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
the guy took the picture of the famous war picture,
the famous
anti-war picture.
Actually, it's funny. Like if you talk to him, he says like he was just there and then he took the photo, right?
Right.
So he said in that interview that photo has been used in so many ways, right? And it's been accused of being used in so many ways.
Is he a reporter? Or was he?
He was an AP. He was working for the Associated Press, and then he ended up getting nominated for the Pulitzer for that photo.
Yeah.
And many people credit that photo as one of the pieces that shifted
the narrative of Vietnam.
A turning point for Vietnam.
Right.
So one of the things that I was thinking yesterday is how what's happening right now is that we are.
What's happening right now with Gaza?
In Gaza.
All the information is immediate now.
Exactly.
It didn't take a while until they developed the picture. The technology is different now.
Exactly. We have a Napalm Girl photo every hour or less. Every 10 minutes of our lives, we have, her name is Kim Phúc. I think it's Jung Thị Kim Phúc. We have access to thousands and thousands of
everything
images.
On Twitter, social media.
So think about the fact that we during the Vietnam War, there was a photo that could change the course of, again, like there's a lot of different perspectives and ways to look at that particular moment in time. But nobody can deny that it had a very significant impact on the world, right? And that's why we're still talking about it now, almost 50 years after the war. Like people still reference that photo. That girl went on to be a peace activist. Now, with the oversaturation of access and images to the atrocities, it's almost like I again, like that's why I said like I don't have this isn't anything there. I don't have a conclusion.
Do you feel we're growing numb to the saturation of images, or
I don't know if we're fully becoming numb, because I can see that the tide has shifted and the tide has changed for so many people, right?
Yeah.
During in the last 6 horrific months, we have watched the tide change for so many people who didn't ever think about Palestine are now thinking about, talking about, standing up, fighting, right?
The posture changed.
Yes. So I think numbness is happening all the time anyway, right?
Yeah.
And so I think
I think it's the opposite. Like people got to a stance quicker or faster thanks to the social media than maybe if the social media would have been active during the Vietnam War.
Yeah,
it might have saved millions of lives.
Yeah, but but it's hard.
We don't know.
Yeah, but exactly, it's hard to say too, because then right now we're seeing just like the worst possible conditions and conditions that are leading to famine, current starvation,
right.
Just like all of that to say, I don't, again, like I said, I don't have a conclusion, but I just sat yesterday and I thought, like, how are we in a moment where we have access to images like that Napalm Girl photo, but we have it all day, every day, like
every day
after this conversation,
right?
Before we go to sleep tonight,
right?
We have access to seeing a child whose bones, you can see the bone through their flesh.
Yes, it's terrible.
And we'll wake up tomorrow morning and it's just, I don't think that we are simply like becoming numb, but I do think that something is happening with our brain and also with a structure where so many of us feel so powerless. You know, and
Yeah.
again, there's no answer to it. It's just that is something that I have observed, and I find it really, really, just
I think
penetrating.
the powerlessness comes from, at least my powerless, or the feeling of it comes from just like the images are there, and the majority of humanity all over the world are against this genocide because it's obvious that it's a genocide, and it's still going on. So I can't understand that, it's so obvious, but it's still going on,
Yeah.
and it could be stopped. And the people in power, I feel like they just, they're obviously programmed in a different way to favor the money instead of the people. Because that's what I feel goes on.
Yeah.
Because if they would favor the people, the people in power, they would stop it. But they don't stop it because they favor the power, the money. That's why I feel like it's obvious. Like if people really, if there were a true democracy, people would vote a ceasefire. But there's so much bureaucracy, so much things to get, like what people really want to get done. It takes so long, and if it were like, it's easier to vote for your American Idol than for a ceasefire, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's what makes me feel like, and it's just gonna it's gonna keep going because like there's some gonna twist it in a way that's it has to be done, and they're gonna twist it in a different narrative. So that's where I feel like there's like hopelessness and there's no real democracy.
Yeah.
But I mean, we could keep debating. Politicians won't listen to us because they favor like lobbyists.
Yeah. I do want to make while I agree with the way that profit interacts with politics and the continuation of horrifying atrocities, I do also want to point out that it doesn't, even if we're talking about a reality in which a tremendous amount of people recognize how horrific the slaughter of civilians in the name of annihilating a terrorist group, even though there are a tremendous amount of people who see that or share that perspective, I do want to comment that it's not just politicians who are committing to a narrative that is contrary to that. It's not just, there is an entire there's an entire
culture,
other, not culture, but there's an entire other narrative like that isn't just fueled entirely by power, right? Like there are so many people also in the world who believe, and you can see it in so many of these social media posts, right?
Right.
Every single time, if you see Mark Ruffalo calling for a ceasefire, if you look at the comments, you're gonna get all of the messages that say, well, if has Mark Ruffalo called for the release of the hostages left, and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah,
that's not just power in politics. That is, it comes from a narrative that is different from the other narrative, right? And so I
however, I feel like that I feel that the people that get this narrative from their politicians, they get the narrative like this is what's going on, and the people, everybody's been programmed, but these people have been programmed into supporting this war because they get the same narrative from their politicians and from their corporate media into supporting that.
Yeah. So, and that goes for all wars in the history of time, right? And even when we don't talk about war, if we're just talking about the condition of American democracy,
right.
and trying to understand how, one of the things that all these people around the world kept on saying a few years ago is like, and they're going to say it again in a few months, is, oh my God, look at the Americans. How wild is it that there's so many Americans that believe Trump, or like who support Trump, right?
Yeah.
But again, it's just another, it's a testament to that condition, right? Of like different narratives fueled by certain fears, right? In the
Right.
case of the, like people who are like, first of all, a hostage situation is horrifying, right? Like
Yeah.
if you or your family members were taken hostage, and then or killed, right? Like that is horrifying. If we take a step back and then we start talking about like context and history and stuff, like sure, but the thing, and this is why I talk about emotions, is that what is robbing us of the ability to talk about these things is emotions and fear, right? And so in those cases, in this, and then of course, if there are people in power who are helping to maintain narratives, then they benefit from fueling the fear that comes from these scenarios, these situations. And so in this moment, the sides that exist, it is fueled by a century, right? And so you're talking about, like, look at how hard it is for us to resolve we haven't resolved the Trump, the Trump versus
Biden,
Biden or whatever, the right versus left.
Versus Biden.
No, we can't even talk about the right
Part two.
But yeah. Like the right versus the center versus the left in America. We can't even resolve that. And that issue is more recent, much more recent, right? And look at how incapable we are of having that conversation. So of course, the discourse surrounding Gaza is the way that it is on this, and it's not just people in power. It's many people, and it is and it's very sad.
Well, I think Trump versus Biden part two, that plays into the interests of corporate power, because they're both puppets. I feel Biden's more of a puppet. He feels like Weekend at Bernie's. You ever see that movie, Weekend at Bernie's?
No, I didn't see.
He's like, oh, I recommend it. Just imagine like a dead guy, but he's moved around to play like he's alive. That's Weekend at Biden's. But I feel like basically you have two options, bad and bad. Mm-hmm. And they work out perfectly for corporate interests, not for people's interests.
Yeah, but absolutely. And I think it is extremely
I think it's important to talk about it, because the more you talk about it, like maybe more people are aware of it.
Yeah. And I think a huge amount of people are aware of it. And
then they can slowly build, I don't know, like third and fourth and fifth party out of, because it feels like very like when they say they have no democracy in China. You don't have democracy here either. Like, it's two parties that they're financed by corporate interests, and that's it. That's what you have.
Yeah, and I think that we are going to see in this lifetime a change in our. Goes back to what you were talking about, my optimism. Like, yeah. I don't particularly. Yeah, sure, you can call it optimism. But I really feel that things are shifting. That doesn't mean that we aren't going to find ourselves in a scenario that is really, really bad, maybe violent, maybe whatever, right? But I do believe that we're going to see a shift in this lifetime. Because if you, so, you know, you mentioned that I work with people, I train people, I work with young people, and I really, even though there's plenty of very intense young people who have absorbed a narrative that helps, that seeks to maintain America's status quo.
Right.
But there's such a tremendous amount of young people who are very, very, it's not that they're simply that they're committed to disrupting the status quo, is that like they do not accept they don't accept things as they are. And so then those people are going to,
and they have every right, because I don't like the way things are
either.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so those people are going to be a part of whatever it is that we're going to see, right?
Until they're bought.
Well, but if we manage to change the way that commodity exists in our lives, then we may see like what will it mean to be bought, you know? And so all of that to say, like, we are in a really dismal place in time. But of course, if we were talking to each other 30 years ago, we would say that we were in a really dismal place in time. And I don't particularly don't feel particularly the need to get into like the Trump versus Biden conversation. I can appreciate your sentiments. And I also want to defer to people who have been working on the issue that is most dire right now, which is what is happening in Gaza. And even if Biden is so, I don't even know the word.
Meat puppet.
Even if Biden is, has the history that he has and his support of Israel, nonetheless, if Trump were to get into office this fall, then
it could be worse.
It could be worse. And so earlier off camera, you talked to me about going to knock on doors during the last election, and a big part of that is like, if you asked me then, I would have told you my feelings about Biden. I have never ever liked and supported Biden ever. And so when you saw me knocking on doors in Arizona, that's not what it's about at all, right? And so when I share with you like what I think is important about engaging our bodies and our minds in something that in life, in engaging with people and talking with people, like that is a big part of that moment for me. Like that is it's an action against something that I don't want to take place.
Right. Not
an action because I love Joe Biden and I want him to be the president. I mean, it's like, it was, even leading up to that, I was like, oh my God, like, it really almost like sickens me to think about it. But then the closer you get and the closer you get to seeing the material ways that a presidency can impact people in this country and around the world, it is that which moves me. And so we are in a horrific kind of condition that needs to change in America with this two-party system. But for now, this fall, we need to make sure that Trump is not elected, because the situation will be even worse, which is hard to imagine because it is already so horrifyingly bad.
It's already bad, yeah.
Yeah. See, that's why you should have ended the conversation when I was, you know.
No, we can talk a little bit more. Let's talk a little bit more. Okay, so let's talk about.
No. I mean, you know, whatever. But and again, like it's also.
Okay, let's end on a positive note.
Okay, sure. I mean, like I was saying, I really believe that we are going to see the change in our lifetime.
Right.
Yeah. And so that is a positive note. And by the way, if you work with young people, it's
You have to tell them that. If you work with young people, you have to tell them that.
actually, you know, funny enough, I was working with young people just earlier this year, and whew, when we were talking about this topic.
How are young people today? Are they negative?
No, actually, you get the full
spectrum. Some kids
you get
are
the full
positive.
spectrum. You get the full spectrum. Yeah. You get people who feel extremely powerless but are committed to witnessing.
To working.
To witnessing and working. And then you have people who are like, oh, you're not going to resolve.
What's the point?
What's the point? Take care of yourself. And then you get the people who believe, you know, like on the other end. Like, so you get the full spectrum. But with the younger generation, we are getting just a willingness to reject and resist in a way that I think in our generations we have not seen that level of commitment to resistance. And I say that as somebody who's like my network, my network and my community like is primarily people who disengage, right? Disengage and don't disrupt and don't resist and truly believe in the futility of resistance. And the nice thing is that with when I work with younger people, the number of people that I see who are who don't yet feel this way is extremely large. And the difference with our generation is that I don't know about how it felt like for you growing up, but growing up, so many people didn't see things as being wrong. And so then people that I grew up with started to see things as being wrong. And then now you have people who are much younger, who are already starting to see that. I work with an 8-year-old and I hear like
8-year-olds.
Yeah, I work with an 8-year-old and I hear very, very critical and resistant ideas come from the 8-year-old. So I do think like because for example, like even in America now, they don't talk about Thanksgiving the way that they talked about Thanksgiving when I was in elementary school. They talk about it differently now.
How do they talk about it?
They talk about
they talk about the Indian's point of view, the American Indian,
they talk about how they talk about they basically they share about the genocide of Native Americans in America. It's like so all of that to say things are shifting in a way that, of course, for us is a little bit hard to conceive of and fully understand. But I believe that things are gonna change.
Well, what I'm gonna take from this conversation is that it's important to try to analyze the full spectrum and try to understand it and share and hear other people's emotions from all over the spectrum, and try to find common ground. And it's when you see the full spectrum, you can see that, you know, in some places there's like a stalemate, but in other places there's some change. Yeah. Like in different parts of the world, there's change somewhere. You know, it's not always, not everybody's at a stalemate. So Let's end on that note. That's pretty positive. What do you think?
Don't know if it's gonna make you feel, easier to sleep at night, but
buck up, everybody.
Up.
Buck up and
actually, literally, buck up.
Buck up and try to find, comfort in that there's change somewhere.
There and
maybe soon in your neighborhood.
and engage. Engage, connect, listen, and listen.
Have
here.
Cool conversations.
Yeah.
Where can people call you, Quyen, so they can have interesting conversations with you?
Oh, actually,
give us your digits.
Or your Instagram. I actually do work with people too, like when talking about these type of things. And so I work with people on like a one-on-one basis in addition to like groups. And so if anyone ever wants to consult or
like for training for
coaching,
coaching this is like for acting also, not just for training for activism, but also for coaching for acting, right?
Not just sure. I'll do that, but on like if you go to my website, the coaching that I do covers a spectrum of things. So I incorporate a lot of the obviously there are coaches of all sorts out there. The coaching that I do, I like to ground a lot of it in the type of work that I discussed during our conversation. We also started off the conversation talking about power. And so a lot of the work that I do, training and consulting and coaching, I embed a systems framework. So thinking about power and systems, and then also empathy. And so I cover personal and relational work, social and political matters, organizational and work matters. So like things like organizational structure, work culture, things like that, communication. And then I have a category just called a la carte. And so that's so like when you say things like acting or whatever.
You want a little bit of this, a little bit of this? And
no. A la carte is just like if you have a specific thing that you want to work through.
Okay.
I work with people like that. Like sometimes it's like just like one difficult conversation or one difficult message that they want to deliver.
Right.
And so because I've trained with this type of frameworks, I can work with people individually to help them work through that and practice or role play or whatever. And so anyway, that my digits are through my website, which is q-ngo.com. And that on that website, I break down all of the things that I'm talking about. And so I've had a really amazing time working with people one-on-one to cover a whole gamut of issues that they're trying to tackle and work through.
That's amazing. Yeah. Thank you, Quyen. It's awesome having you again. You should come more often because there's always something new to talk about.
Yeah, we always have many things to talk about.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So don't forget to subscribe. Visit Quyen's webpage if you want to get in touch with her. And buck up, guys. Nordopolitan. Peace.
Buck up.